So now on to some aspects of Victorian morality that are mentioned in Walter Houghton's book. And he talks about different aspects. He talks about the intellectual aspects, which on one hand have the new role to question everything, to look for answers yourself, but on the other hand, there is a lot of people in the 19th century who rely on the authority. So this is really the good time for all kinds of self-proclaimed prophets, cultural prophets. And if you read any of the 19th century works of history or art criticism or anything really by great men of the period like Thomas Carlyle or John Ruskin, you will sometimes be even irritated by their tone, by their lofty tone, like they pretended to know everything. So this was expected of them, and this is perhaps the result of the culture of self-improvement, the culture of self-learning. Many of the members of the middle class were self-taught. They would be avid readers. Actually, the Victorian period is one of the best moments in history if you were a writer of long essays. You would have the readership, you would have the meetings with your public, you would have all kinds of lectures organized for you. So yes, but there is one thing missing from self-education, and this is actually something, the same thing I'm missing from this kind of online course, and this is the feedback. This is the opportunity to discuss. This is the opportunity to not only be fed the knowledge by the professor or an expert, but to compare your opinions, to compare your understanding with other people in the group, with other students, as well as the expert. And this is really something I'm missing because of this unfortunate lockdown, and I hope that perhaps it will end sooner than later. So that's one thing, the intellectual climate of the 19th century, in which on one hand you have a lot of intellectual curiosity and independence, and on the other, for the mass reader, for the mass student, you really have people recoiling and relying on authority of the expert or the professor. So that's one thing. And then he goes on, Walter Houghton in his book, he goes on to talk about emotional attitudes. And I think they are really the most important. And they are really the backbone of Victorian morality. So this is something that really makes the concept of Victorian morality enduring, so much so that you have sometimes politicians, especially conservative politicians. Margaret Thatcher had a knack for that. She would always speak that we need to return to Victorian values. So Victorian values have become something of a shorthand for a few things that really started in the 19th century, but then were associated with a set of what you might call conservative values or middle class values for the decades and centuries to come. So what were they? So first of all, the work ethos, hard work, and the belief that work is as Walter Houghton puts it, the means through which the soul is saved. So it's given almost religious value. If you remember the Bible, work and childbirth were both punishments for eating the forbidden fruit. in the Garden of Eden. So when Adam and Eve were expelled from paradise, God punishes them, and He says to Eve, "You will bear children in pain." And He says to Adam, "You will have to toil for your bread." So work was punishment for sin. Uh, so it wasn't anything moral. It was just the punishment you had to endure. In the Victorian morality, work is a moral thing. This is the path to improvement. This is the path to salvation for both men and women. Of course, if your family was rich enough, then being a woman, you would not work for money, but you would be encouraged, for example, to involve in charity. This is a great time for charity. And this is perhaps something that the conservative politicians really like about Victorian values. Self help, self reliance. You do not burden the state with your misfortune. You either have to pull yourself out of the trouble, or if you cannot, you can rely on the charity of others and not that you are entitled to any welfare. So that's a very Victorian thing. Self improvement, self reliance, and charity. Then what we have is earnestness and enthusiasm. So two more very Victorian words that Walter Houghton uses. Enthusiasm, there is a similar word in Polish which means kind of wholehearted application to whatever you're doing. Looking for genuine things in life. So, an aspect of hard work, but you do it smiling. So, if you are willing to improve your position in life and you want to educate yourself, you just educate yourself all the time. You have to work, well, tough luck, but in the evenings you learn. So whatever you do with a smile and a kind of cheerfulness that helps you pull through. Earnestness, perhaps you recall this word from the title of a very popular late Victorian comedy by Oscar Wilde, The Importance of Being Earnest. It means honesty matched with seriousness. So a similar concept. Victorian culture did not value irony and wit very highly. Of course, there are some aspects of popular culture, especially, that have that, but the middle class culture valued earnestness. It means they valued, again, serious outlook on life. The opposite of earnestness, again, a Victorian word, was levity. Levity means a light treatment of serious matters. So if there is a serious thing, a serious problem, and you laugh about it, you make jokes about it, you wouldn't go very far in Victorian culture. So earnestness and enthusiasm as attitudes towards life, towards spirituality and self-improvement and education and such things. The next thing, which is very typical for the Victorian culture, is hero worship. I mentioned already the intellectual proclivity of the Victorians to look for authorities, to rely on authorities. And this was connected with the hero worship. And if you look at Victorian attitudes towards history learning, for the Victorians, as expressed by one of the greatest Victorian historians, Thomas Carlyle, great men are profitable company. It means you should learn from the giants. You should learn from the geniuses. So if you look at the way that Victorians taught history, it's never about processes, about the society, about any kind of gradual changes. There is a state of civilization, then a genius comes and puts it up. There is a plateau for a while, then another genius comes and puts it up. And geniuses could come in very different aspects of culture, sometimes simultaneously, more than one. So there could be great kings, great military commanders, great conquerors. They could be great artists of different areas of art. They could be great religious leaders. They could be great philosophers. Uh, and basically, in any aspect of life, progress is brought about by great individuals. There were even great women. So, history books popular in the 19th century usually tell the story of great individuals from mythology, from history, even from contemporary day. They were very popular, for example, the biographical books about the great engineers of the Industrial Revolution. So the people usually from relatively poor background who improved themselves because of their talent, because of their hard work and dedication, and also because of a little bit of luck. So these were also kind of motivational books. And very many Victorian intellectuals and artists even compiled lists of their personal heroes. You might want to think about it for yourself. Just after you finish watching this part, think about who you respect in history or in the arts or in philosophy, and this would be a very Victorian thing to do. You may even write a list if you have such heroes. So this was a very Victorian way of looking at things. And in the next part, we'll look at the Victorian understanding of love and family.